This was an innocent time. Remember back in the day in elementary school, when during the middle of the day, you could go home for lunch. Anybody remember that? Oh, yes. Yeah, I figured you did. And I would skip along going home for lunch because that was one of the highlights of my day. It was a highlight of my day because my dad was there. My dad worked second shift or third shift or whatever it's called. He didn't go to work until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So he was there to always prepare my lunch for me. Peanut butter and jelly or tuna, ham and cheese, yuck. And what else? Meatloaf. Or maybe something left over from dinner last night. So I was always excited to go home to talk with my daddy because actually I was a daddy's girl, always. Well, this particular day I skipped on home and I noticed something a little different on my street. Across the street from where I lived were apartments. And right there on the sidewalk on the apartments across the street, I saw some furniture and bags and lamps and clothes. And I didn't know what that was all about. So I went in the house and I asked my daddy, what's going on over there? What's that? What's that? Remember, I'm just a little girl. So he explained to me that this family had been set out. In today's term, we call it evicted. And I didn't understand that. And I said, well, what is that? And he said, well, that means that in order to live in the apartment, you have to pay rent. They didn't pay their rent for several months, so they were set out. And I went like, oh, okay. And continued to eat my sandwich. Now, understand the kind of little girl I was that I always liked learning things. Always liked learning things, and I always liked sharing things. I'll get to that in a moment. So I went on back to school, and I started telling people, guess what? Guess what? And I told the story of Joe, who lived across the street from me, whose family had been set out. Guess what? His mama didn't pay the rent. Guess what? And I went around the entire room and told people that. I want you to remember, I'm only 9 years old. So all of a sudden, somebody walks up behind me, taps me on the shoulder, and it was Joe. And Joe said, are you telling people what happened in my family? And I said, yes. And the next thing I knew, I was on the ground. I had been popped upside the head. And I know normally you would think that that's kind of not a good thing, but probably justified in the sense that I had invaded something he had done, something that happened in his family. So I fell on the floor because I was taken to being slightly dramatic and yelled a little bit. And then here comes Mrs. Harrison, the teacher, and she wanted to know why I was on the floor. What did you do? She asked. And I said, well, I was just sharing that Joe's family got set out. And she looked at me, and then she put her hand down and pulled me up, and she said, do you think that was such a good idea? And I said, I didn't really think anything about it. I was just telling because I was the kind of kid that always wanted to let you know how smart I was. You know, so I didn't think anything about it. Well, she started to explain to me that that really wasn't my business. And she also explained to me that that's probably Joe was angry. And the next thing you know, Joe came over to me. And he said to me, did you tell everybody about my family's business? And I said, yes. That's why you got hit. And I apologized to you. And Ms. Harrison was glad about that. But Ms. Harrison also started to tell me this, that it's not good to talk about things that don't pertain to you. And that sticks and stones can break your bones. Words can help as well. Can hurt, rather, as well. That's it.